I'm Corbett Wall with USDA Livestock and Grain Market News. Here with your weekly feeder and stocker cattle market summary for the week ending September the 21st, where you had calves and yearlings both selling steady up to $3 higher. Many places calves selling even higher than that and up to $6 higher. Most notably in Oklahoma and areas that border Oklahoma and places that send a lot of calves into that part of the country. Like Missouri and southern Kansas, maybe eastern Colorado, places like that, because they're looking like they're going to have some pretty decent wheat pasture there in Oklahoma. They've had some rains, not general, but sporadic rains around, and they're really doing a lot of wheat planting right there and getting a lot done. And if they can get some warm weather continuing, some nice sunshine with what little moisture they've had, should have a pretty good stand of wheat pasture here before too long. But your feeder markets have just been steadily rising ever since the first week of August, last week of July, right in there when it was so dry, and it's still dry a lot of places, but the drought was really reaching its peak at that point. But right in there, that first week of August, we saw the fat cattle market turn around and take a pretty good jump, over $3 in 1 week there. And about the same time, we started seeing a few rains start coming across the Midwest, and that had really sparked the feeder markets. And we haven't seen huge jumps, but we've just seen a slow, steady rise ever since the first week of August, and that's been over 6 weeks now, and we keep gaining a little ground, but we look back and see how much market we lost from the all-time record highs that we saw earlier this year in March, when it really peaked out. But it's hard to remember how much ground we lost right there during the heat of the summer, because we've had 6 weeks of rising markets, and still our calf prices for the most part are $20 to $30 lower than those records we saw in March, and our yearlings are still $5 to $10 lower than what we saw in March there. But and we're starting to see those gaps really close, especially in the northern plains, Nebraska and the Dakotas and places like that. They're getting closer than anywhere to getting back to that market that we saw there in March, which was the all-time record highs. At Mitchell, South Dakota, they had a good run this week. They're on Thursday, and the highest prices I saw on heavy steers, around 500 head there, 9-weight top quality steers, average 938 pounds at 140,106. That's a heck of a good price for a big heavy steer like that. And then on light calves out west in Ogallala, Nebraska, they had over 400 head of little peewee fancy, mostly black calves, weighing from 300 to 450 pounds. They averaged 370 pounds at $213.11. That's a heck of a price, and starting to sound like those big records that we saw earlier in the year. But probably your best demand for feeder cattle right now is actually for those lighter yearlings, your long-time weaned calves that would be similar to a yearling, that are just about big enough to go into the feedlot, but it's going to need several days, more than 120 days, maybe up to 150 days on feed, that are going to hit that April market, that April fat market. Or March is just as good, but it's going to be based off that April fat market, and that's the highest price that we see on the board there. And like this week at the old St. Joe Stockyards, which by the way is under private ownership for the first time in about 130 years, but it's the last remaining river market that's still going. But the old St. Joe Stockyards had a short load of 760-pound steers. They were thin, conditioned, and empty. Anyway, those steers weigh 760 and bring 159 and a quarter, or $1,210 a head, which is getting back up there to what we had saw there around March and in those big prices there. But your grain markets took a pretty big dip this week, and first time we've seen that in quite some time. Corn was down about 30 cents for the week, beans down almost $1.50 for the week, and your harvest is in full swing across your main part, your central part of the corn belt there. And it's not great by any means, but it is a little bit better than a lot of guys feared that it was going to be. Maybe some corn that they didn't quite think was even going to be worth turning the combine loose in there, and they're getting 40, 50, 60 bushels the acre. And there's still some places, especially right in the Missouri River Valley right through there, where they're getting 200 bushels the acre. So, you know, it's not a complete bust, and probably going to end up adding up to a little more than what we feared. But your nutritionists are really cramming these numbers, and they're coming up with some different rations using all kinds of different products that we can get a hold of, especially silage. But, you know, corn is king, you know, when you're feeding cattle, but it's going to get to the point where we can't afford to do that, you know, especially this year, and probably going to learn a lot about a lot of different feedstuffs that are out there, and could really do us some good down the road to help cheapen up those feed costs. But cattle on feed report come out Friday. Your on feed inventory as of September the 1st come in just a tick lighter than what they thought at 99%, and most of them were guessing 100. Your placements were the big deal. They came in quite a bit under what they thought. The average guess was 92 to 93, and placements come in at 89% of a year ago, which is quite a bit lower, but it makes a whole lot of sense. Your nationwide auction receipts for that same period right there for an August placement were only 81.5% of a year ago. So very easy to rationalize that. These guys that are trying to peg this cattle on feed report still having a hard time with the marketings, and you know, we're told every day how many cattle were slaughtered every day to the penny, and the marketings are still coming way below at 95% when the average guess was 98.5. Regional weighted averages this week up in the north central states, a 700 to 800 pound steer this week cost you $148.10. Last week, 147.56, and a year ago, 134.89. Down the south central states, 600 to 700 pound steer cost you $148.60 compared to $148.12 last week and $134.86 a year ago. Down in the southeast, 500 to 600 pound steer cost you $143.33 compared to $142.43 last week and $124.20 a year ago this week. That wraps up your feeder markets for this week. Check out our website for more market information at marketnews.usda.gov. And from the Regional Market News Office in St. Joe, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.